Good morning. Welcome to office hours. If you could just let me know if you could hear me. I had to switch my audio video setup very last minute, so let me know if you can hear me okay. Let me know in the chat if you can hear me. I've also been having some lagginess crowdcast as well, so okay, perfect. Thank you. So welcome everyone. Today we're going to chat about resource hubs in Notion. This is, I know I say this every time, this is one of my favorite sort of use cases for Notion, but it really can be so powerful. And if any of you have used Evernote before, or maybe you used to use Evernote, I used to kind of store everything inside of Evernote, and I definitely had a habit of clipping and storing and saving things that I would never go back to. And I don't find that's the case with my Notion setup. So I get asked a lot of questions about how I manage my resources. So I'm going to share that with you here. Let me know in the sidebar where you're coming in from. And there is a poll below just to kind of get a sense of what your Notion experience is, so I can tailor the walkthrough and maybe not go through too fast. Seems like we've got a couple beginner and intermediate folks here. Hey, Brad, welcome. And how's everybody doing? Are you spending more time in Notion now under quarantine like I am? Hey, Torin, great to see you. Cool. So I'm going to keep an eye on the chat. If you do have any specific questions that pop up, feel free to use the Ask a Question area below. And we are going to bring on a guest about halfway through as well to show one of our, to show another use case for the resource hub, which is pretty cool. So awesome. Welcome, Chicago, Kentucky. Cool, para section. Yeah, so many of you probably heard me talk about para. That's generally the setup that I use for my Notion workspace, which is basically projects, areas, resources, and archives. Now, the way I set this up is a little bit different depending on whether or not you're storing personal resources or sharing resources within a team, but I'm going to show you kind of how I handle it. Welcome from Toronto. Awesome. So I'm going to zoom in on my screen. And so some of you may or may not have seen my Marie HQ before, but this is basically my personal homepage, you could call it. This is anything that basically my husband or other team members cannot see lives in here. And you'll see here, this sort of mimics the para, so projects, areas, resources. Archives, I don't spend a lot of time in there. That's basically a dumping ground, so I don't worry too much about that. So, and just to kind of quickly show you, Okie dokie is basically areas, but this is the areas that my husband and I share together. So anything that's shared, household and business, all gets stored here. And then this is basically the equivalent, but for my personal stuff. And I'm happy to clarify any of that there. Hello from Manila, welcome. Okay, cool. Lots of intermediate folks here. Okay, great. Feel free to tell me to slow down as I'm going through some of the specific database functionality, and I can definitely, we can get into a little bit of a how-to as well. So really the heart of this is the Knowledge Hub that I'm going to show you kind of how I use this, but these are basically all of my different resources databases here. So you can see there's a Knowledge Hub, Home and Garden, Inspiration, Tags, Swipe, Assets. And then Sandbox is honestly just where I will drag databases in and move data around as I'm playing with the best way to set up a database. I have started, Karen. Can everyone still hear me okay? You may, I guess, you may need to refresh your browser. I have noticed other clients as well. I think as more and more people are using Crowdcast right now, there has been a little bit of lagginess. I'm sure everybody's just spending a lot of time on the internet right now. So, okay, so Karen, thank you for asking. So my Knowledge Hub is basically all of the knowledge that I'm consuming. So that is books I'm reading, podcasts I'm listening to, online courses that I'm taking, you name it. It's pretty much, I used to actually have separate databases. So I would store all of my books in one place and all my courses, and I had all these separate databases. But as I've come to integrate more and more of my, like my journal and my weekly agenda into my Knowledge Hub, it made way more sense for me to kind of unify all that information in one place. And then I just assign a type to it. So I'll get into that a little bit deeper. Yes, there is a recording of this session, and Notion always uploads these to their YouTube channel, so you can always pause and rewatch later if you like. So I'm going to log into my Knowledge Hub. So a change that I made recently, actually inspired by DJ, who's going to come up in a little bit. I'm going to dig into the database itself before I dive into the changes that I made. So here we have, this is pretty much a dump of all of the things that I store and clip and save into my Notion. So it can look like a pretty big, overwhelming table, right? And so I actually don't often go right into the Knowledge Hub. I'm usually storing, saving information kind of as I'm on Twitter, I'm surfing the internet, maybe I'm looking at an article on my phone. I just do send to Knowledge Hub, or I use the, I'm sharing the app with you right now, but if I was in the web, I would use the Evernote Clipper and Evernote Clipper. Don't tell anyone I said that. The Notion Clipper, and I would send that right to my Knowledge Hub. And then it asks you if you want to open that in Notion. And so I would click on that, open that in Notion, and add any additional data. So let me just open one of these that I recently saved into my Knowledge Hub. America is looking at a likely depression, not a recession. Don't tell them I slipped up. And so what I do is I usually go in and just add the type. And so I've got a number of pre-made types here, so I can just select these. By the way, I do have a version of this template. I'm totally going to share it with you. It's pretty much a replica of my space without the relations, but there are spaces for you to switch up to connect to your own databases. So I'll definitely share that in the chat window afterwards. So don't worry, you will have a copy of this. I don't fill out everything here. I mostly just fill out the type. And if it's somebody that I follow pretty regularly, I actually pull them from my people database. I actually have a lot of people in here. Those are people that I follow. There are people who, people whose courses I purchased, influencers, even family members. I pretty much put everybody into a people database. And that way I can connect that information to those people. And over time, for example, I can check out, Tara McMullen's posts, and then I can see everything that she's posted, the courses that I'm a part of, etc. And it just allows you to kind of move through that information pretty quickly. Here, I might want to say economy, and then also, because I've been reading a lot about the coronavirus, I've been tagging that as well. And so I just add a couple tags in there. I don't do too much else. Sometimes I'll set up a reminder for myself because I try as much as possible not to get distracted by, shiny objects, articles coming in. I try to save those articles and set them aside for a specific date. So I say, remind me on Saturday. Oh, here we go, remind me. And then make sure to set up a reminder for yourself on the day of the event. I like to do that. And that's pretty much it until it comes time to consume this information. And then I go through afterwards and I do, you might have heard me talk about progressive summarization from Tiago Forte's Building a Second Brain. So where you actually go through, actually read the document and then decide, what's important, what's interesting, and you start highlighting the interesting parts here. So I might give this, highlight it as yellow background. And once you've done that once, you can kind of go through, and there's a bunch of shortcuts like Command-Shift-H to use the last styling. So anything that I do Command-Shift-H is going to automatically become highlighted. So I go through, and then if there's some quotes that I think are interesting too that I might want to reference, again, there's so many ways you can use this, whether you're writing a book or writing blog posts. Any time I'm thinking of creating future content, I don't know what content I'm going to create in the future yet. But if I'm sort of thinking about these things and I'm wanting to sort of activate this information and not just consume it passively, I will go through and I'll say, okay, great, this quote is super interesting. I want to save this. I'm going to copy that, and I have a words and wisdom. And I can actually paste that in there and create a new page. And basically, words and wisdom is where I store quotes and things. So again, if you want to support, pull in other people's perspectives or supporting information to support your content as you're going through, and writing content, it's an easy way to do that. Maybe if I have a project associated with this, I could pull that in from my projects relation. All of this is pretty optional, though. You don't necessarily have to do it, but it just gives you some options that maybe this maybe this article sparked an idea, and I'm like, ooh, I actually want to, write about that thing. I can put that thing in here, add a thing, and I can go check that out later. I can click on that. I can add a note for myself, a reminder to check that out later as part of my weekly review. Oh, everything is. Am I still good? It might be a little bit choppy. Um, okay, so this is day to day kind of how I use my Knowledge Hub. I'm clipping and I'm storing information in here, all the online courses that I'm taking, etc. Hooking them up with people, hooking them up with tags, and then when it starts to get powerful is when you're using that data and pulling it in interesting ways that make sense for what you want to activate. And so DJ, who's gonna come up here, is going to show his sort of entertainment and movie recommendation engine. But looking at the way he was doing that kind of inspired me to make this Knowledge Hub a little bit more interesting, to show this information in different ways. So basically, the Knowledge Hub that I was showing you, that's just a big giant table that's got everything in there, is this here. And what I've done is I've copied and pasted that a number of times in this page here in different ways to show you the different ways that you can show that information. So this is filtered to show me online courses that have a status of in progress. Right, and I can save notes in there, I can save PDFs in there, I know what date I saved it, how much I paid for the course, and then here I can add any notes related to the course as well, which I can tuck into toggles if I want to, or I can attach the PDFs right here. So I'm not having to jump into my Dropbox and find where was that file that I saved or whatever. Over time, your own information or Knowledge Hub starts to become the place that you go to find that information quickly. So this has saved me a ton of time. And again, it's connected to so much other information and data that it's just super easy to find whatever I need. And so maybe I'll show you what this looks like, because if you've never done this before, you might not be familiar for how to do this. So what I'm doing is any block in Notion, you can copy the link to, right? And so I'm going to paste the same thing again here, database. Right, very unsexy view. And what I can do is just create a prettier gallery view. And that's still just going to show me everything from the Knowledge Hub. So I'm going to filter that. Maybe I can filter that by podcasts that I've listened to or what have you. And that's where, again, these you want to make these tags relevant to what you want to store and track. Maybe you don't want to track all of these different things. You totally don't have to. Let's say, or even like a tag contains or a type contains, let's say audiobook, podcast, let's say podcast. So type contains podcast, and I could add an additional filter to say status is complete, more like recommended or whatever. And there might not be any that are recommended right now, so that might not show up. But it just shows you you've got a lot of different choices. The more data you collect and the more sort of tags and status and you start to fill it up, it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you store, how you share, how you show this information. And so one thing I've been experimenting with, I don't know if I've actually done that in here yet, I'll have to double check. No, it's not in this week. I think it's in my existing week, which I won't show you because there's probably not not scrub data in there. But part of what I've been doing as my weekly review is I'll actually embed my online courses here, courses that I'm actively taking, and I'll embed that in my weekly agenda. And that way at the end of the week when I'm doing my review too, if I'm doing my reading on Saturday and I'm checking out my online courses, it's right there accessible for me. Having trouble with roll-ups still. Okay, well, why don't I go into my tag database and I can hopefully help clarify roll-ups. Roll-ups are the most one of the most fun things in Notion. I know William's going to come up and we're going to do a specific a whole session on roll-ups and formulas as well. I know we did the 101 and 201 formulas, but roll-ups can kind of help you take it to the next level. So I use a lot of roll-ups in my space as well. I don't necessarily have some of my stuff scrubbed enough that I could show you right now, but I'll show you a couple places with some really, really simple roll-ups. So I have a master tag database that I use for a number of my other, like the most commonly used databases. So if I open this up, for example, so best self is a tag, and it's connected up to my notes and ideas, my knowledge hub, my swipe file, my content hub, tools, events, references. I mean, you can see it's connected to a lot of different other databases. People, let's say this one is content hub. Sometimes you got to rename those. Entertainment. Which again, DJ is going to come and show his cool setup here. Okay, so I can see basically everything related to best self. And what I have here is a roll up here of the Knowledge Hub. And so what this is anytime you have a relation in Notion, so best self is connected to my Knowledge Hub. And what it's doing is showing me everything in the Knowledge Hub that has been tagged with best self is showing up here. And here, what I'm doing is just saying, I'm choosing which database I want to pull information from, and it has to be connected already in this database here. So I'm choosing from any one of these pre-made connections that are already here on the left-hand side, and I'm saying, show me the name, and I want you to show me all of them. What I could do is say, show me, or so I'm counting all of them. If I said show all, show original, it's going to show all of the names, right? But all I wanted to do here was to show me how many items am I saving from the Knowledge Hub. And so that way, at a glance, I can actually sort this by how many are stored in each of those tags. So I know that best self has the most number of items clipped to it, followed by money, finances, productivity, etc. And I'm basically sorting by that at the moment. So I'm basically sorting by a roll-up property. So that's a really simple example. Let's look at another one. Similarly here, like you can see, there's only one piece of content here. And so that roll-up is just counting the number of items that are in this property here. But we could make a new roll-up. And honestly, I do recommend with rollups to set up a couple test properties to play around and experiment with what that information is doing. I think that's how I learn, is like, digging in deeper, like HTML, CSS, what's happening here? What if I change this? What does that do? So sometimes I'll just set up a little playground so I can configure these properties. So again, I can connect any one of these databases. So let's connect people. And so what I'm able to do is pull in a property from that connection. So this is information that lives inside of that person. So like Mike Michalowicz, for example, is one of the names that's coming through. What I can do is like pull in his role. I can pull in his Twitter bio or pull in his URL. So I mean, if I wanted to, I could pull in all of the Twitter URLs of the people who wrote those posts. So it kind of allows you to pull data that lives a couple steps away into this same space. Let's see, bio. I don't think he actually has a bio filled in there, so it's not going to show there. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do, especially if you've got any kind of sales data, right? You can pull in summaries of data. How much did I earn this month? You can pull in your invoices and do roll-ups and things like that. So there's lots of fun to be had there. Just saw a question pop in, so I'm just going to check in on that. Okay, great question from Tony. He said he's coming in late. What's the difference between the Content Hub and the Knowledge Hub? So the simplest answer to this is Knowledge Hub is what I'm consuming. Content Hub is what I'm creating. So the Content Hub is all of my blog posts, things I'm tweeting about, workshop presentations that I've done. And I love viewing this by the board view. This is just what's most helpful to me personally. So I can kind of scroll through and like see a year at a glance. I can see, Q4 2019. Oh, that doesn't look accurate because January should be hidden here. So through October, November, December, and what you can do is do these summaries at the top as well. So I can see I posted 7 pieces of content in October compared to November that was 18. right? And I can show the type. I have a lot of properties with these as well, so I can show projects they were connected to, journal entries, notes that went along with it, people that they're connected to. So if I turn on people, you'll see like Kai Davis shows up because he came on for the Battle Board Notion office hours. So that just allows me to connect up all that information. So yeah, anything I'm consuming, online courses, articles, you name it, everything goes into the Knowledge Hub. Anything I'm creating goes into the Content Hub. That's kind of like my editorial calendar. So hopefully that helps clarify. Curious what your system looks like for the thought or idea capture. So it totally depends where I am when I get that idea. But I could just jump right into the Notes and Ideas database and just start typing it in there. I could also start typing it in my daily journal. And then once I've kind of done a brain dump of that, I can just highlight that and send it into the Notes and Idea capture. So there's a number of different ways I could do that. And I think it would contextually depend on whether it's related to a project or not, or whether it's like just a random thought or an idea that I want to explore. Cool. So Torian says, I wouldn't use the Knowledge Hub myself for that. I'm using Knowledge Hub for all subjects that I'm interested in, but they're not part of a project or area. That's a great way of thinking of it too. Like everything that I'm saving in the Knowledge Hub, they're not necessarily things that are connected to a specific project yet, but these are skills that I'm building, or things that might contribute to future knowledge, or again, things that I might want to activate in the future. So for example, a project that I'm working on is, actually, this isn't connected. Let's see here. New video setup. So that was a project that I'm doing, right? New camera, lighting, like figuring out how to live stream. So I have a number of pieces of knowledge here and a couple people, like influencers, that I've been saving their content. And so this Knowledge Hub here, I basically called it a guide to live streaming, and I can store multiple videos in here as well, in the body, and also here I can look at kind of related content as well. So it kind of provides these little home pages where similar but disparate information can kind of be pulled into the same space. Another question that popped in. How do you handle articles or content you've come across on the web? Do you have some sort of inbox or system and then later organize it? So I'm not sure if you were here earlier, but basically I use the Notion Clipper quite a bit. And I just select, usually if it's, again, an article that I'm saving, I immediately send that into the Knowledge Hub. That's probably the one that I use the most in terms of information that I'm consuming, articles that I'm saving. I always clip it right into the Knowledge Hub. If I know that it's related to a project as well, as part of my weekly review, when I'm going through and adding additional properties and I'm actually reading those articles, that's when I'll connect it up to projects, maybe add ideas in there and that sort of thing. So yeah, most of my idea capture as well comes after I've sort of entered those articles in using the Notion Clipper. Hopefully that helps clarify. And Lauren, I don't know if that clarifies in terms of like the thought or idea capture. Let me know if you want me to clarify any of that. So you'll see I've got, guides, books, courses. Those are the main ones. And then I can also do things like filter. I'll often give something a status of review if it's something that I want to resurface regularly, like it's an article that I often go back to and I read actively, and maybe there's something that I'm working on, like a project that I'm working on that I know that article is relevant. I will give it a status of review, and it sort of again, just kind of keeps it top of mind here as well. Another thing I also like to do is to filter by anything that hasn't been given a summary yet. So I'm going to jump in here. And actually, one thing that I do is if I'm actively reading a book, which, let's be honest, I'm usually actively reading at least 5 books at a time. But I don't know if anyone else is like that too. What I do is I favorite that book as well. So it's always kind of one click away. This is one of the few times I was actually reading a paper book. Usually I'm reading on Kindle or audiobooks or whatever. And so this is one of the few cases I actually had a copy of the paper book. And so I just opened this up in Notion, favorited it, and I had this kind of open while I was reading the book. And so I was just, typing these out. You can use quotes quote space, and that will give you the a kind of a quick way to capture quotes. And that way I can kind of have these little nuggets and things that are very visual, easy to see. And I just take notes as I'm going through the book. And I can drag things into these little highlighted areas as well if I want to. These are pretty messy notes. But then you can see I'm going through and doing a bit of progressive summarization. So, highlighting the parts that I think are sort of interesting and that are most important and essential. And that way, when I go back over time and I look through my notes, I can be looking at the sort of bolded, highlighted pieces to kind of really get a sense of this, because I've only just started the book and I was, taking a lot of notes. And so I'm sure that there's going to be a lot more here in this post. And then closer to the end, once I've finished the book, that's when I will go through and I will add a summary here, like an executive summary that kind of helps me, did I actually retain that information? What was said here? What am I taking away? And you can see here, I've got a recommendation too of Mind Blown. So yeah, I can filter show me all the books that I've marked as mind blown, and I can kind of keep those top of mind. So hopefully that helps clarify a little bit. I'm happy to answer any other questions in terms of how I use this, or different ways that I activate this information, but you can probably get a bit of a sense of kind of what's happening here. This one's pretty filled out in Mariah's accelerator program, which is amazing. So I'm linking that to people, to tags, all the journal entries where that was a focus, the URL, so I can quickly jump back into those lectures, the rating there, recommendation, cost, notes and ideas. And I store a lot of notes and information from the course itself right in here into this page. And the space gets better over time. I don't go back to really old knowledge. Like if I go into my Knowledge Hub and I just look at the giant dump of data, you'll see the older stuff doesn't have as much of those connections, right? They were just things that I was clipping. But over time, as your tag database gets built out and as you start activating more information, maybe you bring in your people database, it starts to get more and more powerful. But I don't go back and kind of clean up old stuff to make sure it's all perfectly filled out and aligned, only if it makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us, Lauren, get into that habit. Like we read books and then we kind of easily forget them. And so sometimes what I'll do is I'll actually, after I've read a book too, an older book, but maybe something that I know was really important or interesting, I will look up a book summary and I will add those book summary notes as well. And it's just kind of a nice way to go back and review. And yeah, again, happy to answer any questions about that. But this has been it has totally changed the way that I store information, the way that I activate my ideas, the way that I think about things. It's really made me a little bit more discerning about what am I collecting, what am I spending my time reading, and there's things that again, if you're like me and you read a number of books at the same time, not all of those books are relevant to the projects that I'm working on right now. So in some cases, I've had to say, okay, actually, this book is great, but it's not really aligned with my goals right now. If I'm working on my video setup or this or that, well, I need to be kind of aligning the books or articles with what I'm currently working on right now. So it's just made me a lot more intentional with this information, and it's a lot more fun now. So. And so I think we're going to bring up a guest now. DJ, if you're ready, I am really excited for you to share with folks what you've been doing with your recommendation engine. So I am going to pull up DJ, and yeah, DJ's setup has already inspired new ideas of ways I can improve my setup here. So I'm just going to invite you up on the screen. Cool. Just one moment. We're just waiting for. Yay!
Hi there.
Hey, DJ.
You hear me okay?
I can hear you great. Yeah.
Right.
So DJ, why don't you tell us a little bit about the setup that you've been working on? Obviously, I got to see it, but I want to hear a little bit about what you've been working on and kind of how you're using it.
Sure, sure. So to preface, this is very, very work in progress. And when I had showed it to Marie in a previous office hours, she's like, "Hey, you should show this." I'm like, "But it's not done yet."
It's not perfect. It's not ready.
So this is it's a very rudimentary approach to something that I'm trying to solve for, which is the challenge of how do you use Notion to automatically bubble up things that are most relevant out of your resources and out of the areas, because those are the two big pieces of Para that really are not projects, time bound. It's like the ever expansive universe of things that are cool that you want to reference or do, to have the best things bubble forward. The challenge that brought this up was, I can probably share my screen to walk through.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, share your window. Boom. Okay.
Beautiful.
Can you guys see my screen okay?
That's great. Yep.
All right. So I have, over the last couple of weeks, been kind of following the Para method. I'm taking Marie's Notion Mastery course right now, and kind of made my way over to Tiago Forte, and kind of now I have this little mishmash of Para and whatever's going on in my head. And so as I went into the neat thing about Para is that it forces you to eliminate a lot of that top level noise, so that you get down to projects, areas, resources, and archive, and that's it. And so you have to figure out, how do you bucket things at high levels? And so when I went into build my resources, they naturally fell into a bucket around like personal, business, innovation, operations, and reference. Reference being the big part. I think probably is similar to your knowledge hub that I haven't yet built. But thinking about content that's captured, articles, bookmarks, dictionary, glossary, recipes. I do a lot of whiteboarding. I probably have thousands of whiteboards from like my team, so I try to capture those as well. So as I was building this thing, take the red pill, go down the rabbit hole, and all of a sudden you're in the matrix of the Notion. This part, which is, here's the information that I can refer to, started aligning to the areas where here's all the playgrounds that I want to experience, which I broke up as health, purpose, work, play, and love. The play thing stuck out as I was kind of getting lost in Notion, as I think everybody does from time to time, because it's so amazing and beautiful and complicated. One key thing for me that stuck was, there's so much noise and not enough signal until you figure out how the pieces work together. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I, a couple of weeks ago, were just sitting down, having dinner, and it's like, hey, let's watch a movie. It's like, okay, what do you want to watch? I don't know. There's a billion different options, right? So there's analysis paralysis, and ultimately you end up watching like an old show or something like that. So I started building out entertainment-oriented areas, so around games and movies, music, podcasts, TV shows, things like that. And each of them is its own database. And once I got into that, I started to realize, okay, I have the web clipper, so I can just constantly capture stuff. But what am I doing with it? How do I, when I get to that point where my wife and I are, what do you want to watch? Have something that we both have agreed is like really interesting, and sit down and commit to it, because there's that balance of the work and the play that keeps your brain nice and healthy. If the play part is too noisy, you get stuck in the work zone, and that is just ugly, ugly, ugly. So I started building a number of what I call queues, because it's a great word, Q-U-E, love it. So initially I started building up queues that were their own pages. So I'll show you what I have for my up next queue, which is basically everything in the different databases, from books to courses to games to movies, anything that I can stop and consume that has a level of prioritization to it. So these are the books I want to read next. These are the courses I want to take next. And I put it all as reference databases in a singular page. Now, this made a lot of sense to me, because then we can say, oh, we're going to do X. So we can go to the X database on this page and say, okay, we're going to watch The Arrival next, because we haven't seen it. The challenge that I came across was there was no real way to automatically bubble up things that were the most relevant. Oh, my screen size is a little too big. Maybe I can shrink my my screen.
Yeah, perfect.
I'm on a crazy ultra wide, so it's definitely. How is that? Just let me know. Just let me know in the comments if that's a little bit more legible.
Yeah,
I can maximize the screen space a little bit too. Yeah, sorry, I work at like the
giant screen,
super high resolution, which is why I wear glasses. So going back to the queue, how do I take what I want to do, starting with movies, and automate it? So if you go back to the queues, so I had, these are all filtered pages around what am I currently doing, what do I want to do next, what have I done, and ultimately what's my wish list. So I started designing what I'm calling trackers, which are basically where I capture the information and then start bubbling it up using formulas. And then the review section, which is basically the same thing, but it has different formulas applied to it. Now, this is going to get ugly because this is my sandbox, but I'll try to communicate the idea as best I can. To keep myself sane, I kind of put my own objective, just a couple of key tasks that I'm trying to stay on top of. Code, which is basically formulas that I know work that are applied to this, and then basically other code that I found that works, which is basically just like mashing the keyboard in the formula section until it says like the done box turns blue, and you're like, it did something. So I did a bunch of those, like, oh, that's pretty cool. I can actually flip check boxes, or I can turn things watched and unwatched and connect them to other pieces. So let me give you a quick walkthrough of what I have. I'm going to pull my screen out just a little bit more. Okay, so the way that I do this is I'll use the Evernote Clipper. I will grab something from typically IMDb, because they're pretty consistent in their ratings, but you can capture from anywhere you want. Capture that. I do a little bit of OCD manual work. Well, I'll bring in a graphic and any of the other, like, cast and other things like that, just so I can have that a little bit more filled in. Hopefully when Notion has an API, we can automate those kinds of things. So what you're looking at here is my list. So we have whether or not I've watched it, the name, the release date, the IMDb score, and then here's where it gets interesting. What I did was add a number of different fields that were all number fields that are around how do I categorize and then bubble up the relevance and of these movies, right? So interest is my personal interest. So basically, I took IMDb and I converted it to a percentage, right? So a 9.9 is 99%, right? Interest would be, if I have a 9 level of interest, that would be 90%. Relevance, this is also a personal entry, and you can make this however you want. For me, it's like, what am I doing right now? And is this relevant to me? So if I am, let's say I want to, pen a sci-fi screenplay, there are probably a lot of sci-fi movies that I want to watch as a source of inspiration. So I would bump up the relevance for that. And then what I do is I aggregate those into a score. And let's see. So here's the Q score. And let me go into one to show, let's see, Arrival. And I actually have not seen The Arrival yet, which is kind of ridiculous. So there's a watch score, which is basically taking the IMDb rating, my interest, and the relevance, dividing it by 3, and then rounding the number off so it gets back to a percentage. So what that effectively allows me to do is to take community or organization level scores, augment them with my scores, and then ultimately put an aggregated score. I'm also toying with the idea of adding a 0.5% bump for every recommendation I get from a friend. We were talking about this earlier. It's like, okay, it's got a great like Rotten Tomato score, IMDb score, but your friend recommended it, that counts for something. So I was thinking about taking the percentage and adding a 0.5% at the end of the calculation. And that way the things that your friends recommend bump up a little higher. Thank you. It's a good movie. Great, but not great, but really good. Still worth seeing, right? It's maybe my, let's see.
I really liked it.
Yeah, totally. Well, my Q score is about 76.3. I'll watch it, maybe 10 movies down.
Do you have a little field for, like, someone said it wasn't great? That like, takes it down 1%?
Right. It's like, yeah, it was a movie. I saw it. So that's the work in progress. That's the thing that I'm trying to solve for. What I did beyond that was I created a number of cues, and these are just gallery views. I'm a designer by trade, so like to think visually. And what this does is show the title, the tags, and I pulled the tags. I think I pulled the tags from the movie database. You can get them from anywhere, but I want to be able to cross-reference. So if I just want to see, like, say, all sci-fi movies that I haven't watched, there's all the sci-fi movies I haven't watched. But I have an aggregate view, a level of interest view, and an IMDb view. So the aggregate view is the percentage of that formula. So between IMDb, my level of interest, and the relevance to me, how do these things stack up? And this is kind of a random sampling of movies. So judge me later. And then the key part for after that is once I've watched them, right? Because for me, I'm a designer, I'm an artist. I like to create. The pairing of consumption versus creation is obviously a really important thing to an artist. So from here, what I'm looking to build next is a review. Let's see, let me go back to my cues. Is a review tracker that's tied to it. So it's another instance of the database that has other fields. And this is just a generic version. So once I check the box in the queue, then I can go into, then it automatically gets sent into the rating side of things, and then I can automatically assign criteria and then numbers to it, and then write a review if I'm so inclined. It's not like I'm a critic and I'm sitting here all the time just writing reviews. But this one was the simple version of 1 to 10, 10 versions, factor of 10, and then you ultimately get your percentage. But the idea was, build a system that automatically bubbles up the things that you want to do categorically across the areas of interest, tied to a database in your resources, which kind of goes back to Marie's Knowledge Hub. And then once you've done it, put it in a place where you can actually put a little bit of yourself back into it and have a reference for the things that you've done and the way that it made you feel, so that you can use it as inspiration later on. Stopping point for there, Marie. It's I know there's a lot going on there, and it's kind of a work in progress. But kind of thoughts on what we have so far.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. One thing I was going to ask you was, so your ratings database, do you just you don't copy that entry into there, do you? You just sort of like make a new entry that's your review?
Yeah. So the idea is to keep it all in the same database, right? So I want to keep everything bucketed, right? All the articles that I clip using the Notion Clipper go into the articles database, but like for information that I want to pull out of those articles, they get instanced all over Notion. That model seems to work, and it seems to not overcomplicate things. So yeah, the idea is, when this is done, right now I'm using multiple databases to test the formulas because it gets really confusing really quickly. But the idea is to have a master database for movies. And I always append a -db for those. So when I use my Clipper, actually that goes back to like, how do you capture your ideas? I have an articles DB, a movies DB, a games DB. So when I capture something from the web, if it doesn't pop up automatically, I just type -db and just those DBs show up, and then I can actually connect to it. I found that that's an easy way to like capture the relevant content in the web and get it to where it needs to be.
That's awesome.
But the idea, Marie, is to have one single database, and have that database be the ingestion point, the catalog point, ultimately the automation kind of bubble up, and then also the review point. And then those can live in different areas.
Yeah, I feel like we need to call in Conrad Lynn on this. If anyone saw his some of his crazy productivity setups, where if you put this, then that automatically increases the percentage. Like, he has a whole crazy breakdown. I feel like, as from a problem-solving angle, he could be like, "Oh yeah, just do this."
Yeah, and that's where I got to that point, and then we talked the other day, and you're like, "I have people that can solve this for you."
Bring in the troops. No, I'm sure we can figure that out. And I saw Toran asked if will we be able to get the template of DJ's database. I'm interested in this for my anime watching.
Oh, me too. Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of part of this, is to gauge interest, because this seemed to be. It's funny. There's all these like life purpose and work things that I'm trying to solve in Notion. It's like, how about just like watching movies, dude?
I love that.
So yeah, I would love to build out a template and get that template public. Marie, I will need your help, because like some of this formula stuff is a little beyond me. So yeah, maybe
beyond me too. I mean, I'm definitely a tinkerer. Like I'm not super. I just like copy paste from the people who've done it before, and then kind of deconstruct it. And I think Will Nutt did a really amazing job of like breaking it down. And there was the splicing and things that I'm like, oh, that's what that's doing. Okay, so I mean, I'm still not. I'm very not advanced with the Notion formulas, but I can get by.
I watched that stream and basically recreated it as he was describing it, which was hugely helpful. And like, he had some really great ideas around, like, just drop it into a box and format it like code, because then logically your brain will understand, especially like if statements and things like that. So I actually built these as the model for what he was building. It's just like, I learned so much by doing it.
That's cool.
I had one other thing that I wanted to show about the inbox thing, because it helps with the movie queue.
Yeah.
I have it set up for my bookmarks. So somebody had asked about capturing information, and The thing that when I switched over from Evernote to Notion, the Clipper it's relatively robust, but nowhere near as robust as the Evernote Clipper is. I'm hoping that it will get there. So you kind of have to put some systems in place to make sure that you're capturing the right thing into the right place. The part that got confusing, this is kind of another sub project I'm working on right now. If I'm capturing bookmarks or movies or games, they're all going to different databases, and it's really, really hard to get a sense of like what's fresh and new that needs to be kind of scrubbed and prepared. Specifically like articles. Like I go through every article that I capture, and then I do a summarization, I color code it, I build a little bit more of a hierarchy, and then I bucket it with some tags. That way, if I'm looking for something specific, I can not only go in, but I can get the summary of it as well. It's how I do my books. One thing that hit me on the bookmark side, I built an inbox, which is basically the first version of visual of the table. So basically what happens is in my databases, what I try to do is have the first piece be, if you don't have specific forms set up, keep it in the inbox. Once the entries are done, boot it out of the inbox and put it in the bigger pool, right? So it's almost like a queue. So I'm looking at this platform, a wireframe kit. Once I give this a category, it will automatically get out of my inbox and go into where I need. So the idea is, like, ultimately the dream is for every place where I would capture content on the web, it would go to a database that would have an inbox. So whenever I go to those places, I can see the things that I haven't tagged yet. And then ultimately what I'd like to do, and I mean, this is very OCD stuff too, have a page very similar to my movie or to my queue that is really all about the unprocessed information. So you can have basically inbox versions of all the different databases of, here's the stuff that I captured in, say, the last week. Go in and give it its tags and add any detail so it can go back into the bucket with all of the, it's like, pack your kid up with the, lunch pail and send them off to school kind of thing. So that was one thing that I've been thinking about for more broadly for any information you capture. If you have like one view for your inbox that just says, if you don't have one of these fields filled in, keep it in the inbox. And then once you go in and tag it, it goes back into the bigger one. That's how it makes it easier for me to know what I have put in and ultimately what I've filtered through.
Love that. I think that's such a great tip. I know some people too have like just a quick inbox, right? Just an inbox database that you favorite, and anything that you clip, you can kind of like dump in the inbox. And then as part of your daily processing and weekly processing, you can kind of send it where it needs to go. But yeah, I love this system.
Awesome. There's so much to do, man.
I know.
It's a beautiful piece of software.
It's dangerous. I'm curious if designers are more drawn to it because there's that element of just, I can make it, look and do what I want. There's so much, because I think a lot of people get intimidated and don't like the fact that Notion isn't opinionated, and they're like, I just want it to work right out of the box. But there's a lot of building required, but it can really just work the way your brain works. I think that's where it's so powerful.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that you mentioned on the design side, because for me, I need to have an aesthetically pleasing interface before I even get to the functionality. If there isn't a good flow and there isn't a good aesthetic, I mean, it's why I'm having a hard time. Like, I still use Asana because I really enjoy how they're growing their interface. I know that's kind of blasphemous in this, but it's a nice thing. So I've been actually starting to pull graphics in different ways. So I'm using a web version with a Chrome skin. So basically this is my Chrome install, full Chrome install, but I'm saving it as its own kind of web app. And that allows me to use all my extensions like Stylus and User Style. So this is a custom visual of the dark mode. So it kind of pulls the blue-gray out, makes it a little darker, builds kind of a dark light hierarchy, adds these nice bars. And then I've been using icons to denote different, so you can see, like, my actions are a star, my areas is the little map, things like that. And then for the databases that are related to it, I'm doing a stroked version, and it's a medium gray. So whether you go light or dark mode, it works across the board. So I can flip this over to light and the icons will still work. So that's been a key thing for me. It's like, how do I make this pretty? Because if it's pretty, then I'm going to want to spend more time with it.
So true.
Yeah.
That was so thoughtful, because after I saw your setup, I was like, oh, maybe maybe I should try the dark mode. And then of course all the icons and stuff didn't look right. And I was like, damn it.
Yep, yep.
So yeah, Toran was asking, how do you create the web app? I don't know if that's like a longer conversation or if you're able to get into that a little bit.
So I can definitely follow up with instructions, and I know, Marie, we're working on that in the student section. So I'll have the instructions for that, and we can share those out.
Cool.
But it's actually super simple. If you go into the triple dots, I can't show it in this one because this is already a packaged web app. But if you go into the triple dots up at the top, it's not showing my screen, of Chrome, go down to More Tools, and then there's a link to Create Shortcut. And what that will do is it will take any URL and it will package it up as its own instance. And there's a little checkbox that says, launch as window, and you just check that. And what it'll do is it'll strip out the Chrome, for lack of a better term, it'll strip out all the tabs and everything and give you a simple, clean interface. And it works on Windows and Mac. The key part for that is whatever extensions you have in Chrome will remain. So my doc is basically like a couple of installs, like Creative Cloud and Sketch and things that you need like installs on. But most of my apps are actually Chrome apps. So I have Chrome with my tabs as my web browser, but also versions of Gmail and my calendar and Notion and oh god, I have a ton. Lots and lots of different ones. So it makes it a little bit easier because you can share the extensions, you can share the themes, you can share anything you have. So there are a lot of great extensions that are now starting to modify Notion through the web, and you have access to this by using this instead of the actual desktop app, which is pretty amazing in my book.
That is pretty cool. Yeah, that sounds like a couple folks are pretty interested in that. So
yeah. I will. I'll throw the instructions together. Marie, we'll do it in the student section, and then once it's packaged up, you can kind of launch it wherever makes the most sense. It's only a couple of steps, and then what I'll do is put some links to some resources I'm using, like user styles and the themes, just to get that super hot dark theme and anything else that might be helpful.
Yeah, it's good. I was trying the dark theme. I was like, oh, it doesn't quite look like DJ's. It's not quite the same.
There's a specific user style, and it's like as soon as I found it, I'm like, this is the one. This is the one.
That's awesome. I'll definitely add the that information to the call to action button below on this video. Right now, I just have my Knowledge Hub template in there, but we can update the information, and when Notion uploads this to their YouTube channel, we can add that to the description as well.
That's great. That's great.
That's cool.
And I'm obviously open to any conversation that anyone wants to have around any problems they're trying to solve. I'm kind of an intermediate. I've been using Notion for about eight or so months, but getting the bigger picture and figuring that out, like if anybody wants to ping me, like let's solve some problems. Even if we can't technically accomplish it, I feel like we're making progress, getting toward a meaningful end.
Yeah, and I just think it's so helpful to see the other things that work for other people, whether it's agencies or individuals, and the different ways people are using it. I know, like, I consider myself a pretty advanced user, but every time I see other people's setups too, I'm like, oh, that's actually a really interesting way of doing that. The more it's like you're getting to see the way people think out loud, and I think that's really powerful and really helpful. So I'm always kind of going through and like, re-optimizing and making things more efficient when I see other people's setups. So I think it's helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think flip the lens. Like going to see your stuff is like going to Candyland. So totally understand.
It's the blessing and the curse of Notion, right? Like I just had an email from someone this morning that was like, "Hey, I downloaded your templates and I have no idea what to do. What the heck?" And it's like you can download some complex templates into your setup, but if you don't have the grasp of the basics, or you haven't really done like a sort of from scratch with Notion to start, it's going to feel really overwhelming and confusing if you don't understand like database functionality and the instances of the database. Once you wrap your head around that, the sky's the limit. But it's that first hump, I think, just getting someone past that first learning curve and getting someone to see that it's worth the time investment of that learning curve. And it's not for everyone, right? I don't think everyone is as stoked or excited to be, manipulating their productivity tools in this way. But I just think it's, personally for me, it's just changed the way that I think about my work. It's changed the way my own creativity, what I'm consuming. I'm just a lot more mindful of it. And maybe it's coincidence of like other, things that I'm doing and reading, but I just think it's the right tool for that sort of creativity.
I completely agree. Completely agree. Yeah.
Does anyone else have Does anyone else have any questions or like anything that you want us to dig deeper into, or things you've been wondering, things we can cover for you? There's there's a ton. I'm curious, kind of how many people with your agency are working within Notion?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Big fat zero.
Oh, really? Is it just you?
So here's the funny thing. We use a separate system just because we're part of a larger holding company, and it's you automatically go from like, here's these cool tools to like Oracle. So it's
Right.
very, very different at my agency. But our chief technical officer, I geeked out with him about 6 months ago, and he's got the whole dev team working on it. Like they're putting their code bases and everything that they're using. They're keeping. I think they're actually managing their workflow, like their agile workflow within Notion as well, just because it's so comfortable for them, especially like the technically inclined. Like, this is the space where I can have my code, my productivity, and anything else that I need. It's like developers are, you think in all of these little buckets of information and data. It's a great repository. So the tech team uses it as their secret productivity space at my office, but unfortunately at the agency, nobody uses it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know, tears.
Yeah. Do you find that tough? I guess that a lot of your own personal stuff is done through Notion, and then you've got like others. Like, do you find, is it okay because those are different contexts, or do you feel like you're jumping around a bit?
Personally, work-life balance. There's a system over here and a system over here, and it actually works out better that way. I think when I was an aspiring creative, maybe 10 or so years ago, there was the idea of like bringing the whole world together. And it's like, we have enough of that in Notion. Like, I'm fine with like, the bucketed suite of products that we use at our office, and like keeping that where it is. Plus, I think we're just starting to kind of open the doors to working collaboratively as teams in Notion. And, they really added a lot, especially since we started sheltering. They went nuts on, starting to build that connectivity piece. There's going to be, I think, a huge space for this. I think about like, what would an enterprise version of Notion be? Like how do you add that kind of functionality and those deeper connections? But for now, it's a really, really great place for like a single person or a small group of people to just go nuts in. And it's like, it's kind of precious that way. I don't want it to grow up just yet, and I think when they open the doors to the API, that's when it's going to really explode. And so I'm kind of right now really thankful that we don't have the API, because it's a little bit more manageable to get your feet wet and really understand it. Because once we, and we've talked about this a number of times, like, I want to connect to the front ends of the apps that are specifically built for certain things, right? I don't want to build personally, I don't want to build a habit tracker in Notion. I want to use Habitify or Habitica or, one of those other habit trackers. And I want the data to sync to Notion because I want Notion to manage the data and give me the information that's most relevant. But I want UIs built for specific purposes. And the API will hopefully allow for that. But that's a whole other world. I mean, that's beyond the matrix.
Oh yeah, that's going to open up a whole other can of worms, I think.
Totally.
They've got enough funding to last them 10 years. They'll have plenty of time to develop it. Yeah, I think one of their biggest teams is like 900 people or something like that. And I'm like, I don't even know what Notion looks like for a team at that scale. I'm really curious kind of how that works. So
I know. Well, it's funny, like when you dig in, you're working with a team of 900. Those 900 just happen to be all the ideas in your head.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's wild. It's wild. Yeah, no, this is fun. Thank you so much for showing us your space. And yeah, if you want to share any of those resources at all, I think we had a couple people who were definitely curious to kind of get their hands on your template or setup. So
absolutely, I will. It's probably going to take a little bit on the recommendation engine, and Marie, we can talk about that offline, and hopefully
we'll connect with Conrad.
Yeah, that would be great. But regarding the Chrome app things and stuff, I'll package that up and we'll get it out.
Awesome. Cool. And I'm always open to these conversations. So if anyone has their own way of doing the Knowledge Hub, or you download the template and you kind of want a little bit more detail about how something works, hit me up on Twitter. I'm always happy to clarify any of that. And I think next week we have Nick True of Mapped Out Money is coming on next week. And I'm pretty excited about that. When I was first reading Profit First, his YouTube channel was the first place I went. I was like, someone explain this to me in more detail. So it was super helpful. Anyway, thanks everyone for coming. As always, there's a replay. You can watch this anytime if you came in late. No worries. Thank you, DJ, so much for coming up and for inspiring our setups. And I guess we'll see you on the internet.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.